In a hospital, a poor little girl on the verge of death receives a visit that would change everything. Upon meeting her, a powerful millionaire finds himself disarmed by her fragile but hopeful smile. Without knowing who he was, the girl made one last devastating request. "Can you be my father?" At that very moment, he couldn't hold back his tears, and his life would never be the same. If this story interested you, subscribe to our channel, don't forget to like this video, and tell us which city you're watching us from. We'll keep going. It was a grey morning in Boston, the kind where the sky seems to carry the weight of all the world's sorrows. The sound of cardiac monitors and hurried footsteps of nurses filled the corridor of the pediatric oncology ward at Massachusetts General Hospital. There, amid pristine white walls and the scent of antiseptic, one of the most affluent and influential men in the country was making an unusual visit. Known for his generosity, philanthropy, and a fortune built over decades, Maxwell Bennett rarely appeared personally at institutions he funded. But on this particular morning, something compelled him to break from his usual routine and visit this specific hospital. What should have been just a quick visit transformed into an event that would completely change his life. As he walked down the corridor, his eyes were drawn to a half-open door from which came a soft, childlike laugh, filled with fragility. When he glanced inside, his entire body froze. On the bed sat a little girl, extremely pale, with delicate features, large eyes, and a smile that contrasted sharply with the situation she was in. The impact didn't come just from the moving scene. This child bore a striking resemblance to someone he could never forget, his ex-wife Sarah, who had vanished exactly 7 years ago, the victim of a sudden and mysterious disappearance. The same number of years as the girl's age. Her eyes, the shape of her face, even that somewhat shy smile, were perfect copies. Stunned, he felt the air escape from his lungs. He needed to lean against the doorframe to keep from collapsing. Memories came flooding back, the happy moments, the arguments, the unfulfilled promises, and especially the void her disappearance had left. Driven by an impulse he couldn't comprehend, he pushed the door open and entered the room. The girl, surprised, raised her head slightly, her eyes lighting up. She had no idea who he was, but recognized in him a kind face and a presence that somehow seemed familiar. "What's your name?" Maxwell asked, his voice hoarse with emotion. "Emily," she replied softly, studying him with curious eyes. "Are you a doctor?" He shook his head, moving closer to her bed. "No, I'm just a visitor. I help the hospital sometimes." Emily nodded, as if this explanation made perfect sense. Her small fingers traced patterns on the blanket covering her legs. "They say I'm very sick," she confided, her voice matter-of-fact in that way only children can manage. "But I'm not scared." The similarity in her mannerisms to Sarah was uncanny. The way she tilted her head, the slight furrow between her brows as she concentrated, all of it sent shockwaves through Maxwell's system. "You're very brave," he said, unable to take his eyes off her face. A nurse entered the room, surprise evident in her expression at finding the famous Maxwell Bennett sitting at a patient's bedside. "Mr. Bennett, I didn't realize you were visiting today," she said, checking Emily's vital signs on the monitor. "It was an impromptu decision," he replied, his gaze still fixed on Emily. After the nurse left, a comfortable silence settled between them. Emily picked up a tattered book from her bedside table and asked if he would read to her. Without hesitation, Maxwell agreed, taking the book gently from her small hands. As he read, Emily's eyes began to droop, but before she drifted off to sleep, she looked at him with an expression that seemed far older than her years. "What's your biggest wish, Emily?" Maxwell asked, almost without thinking, his voice barely audible. What followed was a silence that seemed to suspend time. The girl took a deep breath, looked directly into his eyes, and with a sweet and determined expression answered, "Can you be my dad?" For a few seconds, everything stopped. The sound of monitors became distant. The outside world ceased to exist. Only those words echoed in his mind, reverberating with enough force to dismantle any emotional barrier he carried. This request, simple yet devastating, opened a box of questions, suspicions, and feelings he never imagined having to face again. How could this girl bear such a resemblance to someone he had loved deeply? And why would fate choose precisely this moment to place her in his path? "I've never had a dad," Emily continued, mistaking his silence for hesitation. "The other kids in the foster homes always had someone visit them, even if it wasn't their real parents." Her voice dropped to a whisper. "I just want to know what it feels like." Maxwell's throat tightened. "I'd be honored," he said, the words coming out before he could analyze them. "But tell me, Emily, what happened to your parents? Do you know anything about them?" Emily shook her head. "Sister Margaret at the orphanage said I was left at their doorstep when I was a baby. No note or anything, just me in a basket." She shrugged, as if discussing someone else's story. "They named me after the nun who found me. The coincidence was too striking to ignore. Left abandoned as a newborn, around the same time Sarah had disappeared. The physical resemblance that went beyond mere chance, the inexplicable pull he felt toward this child from the moment he saw her. "Emily, would you mind if I came to visit you again tomorrow?" Maxwell asked, already knowing he would move mountains to make it happen. Her face lit up with a joy that transformed her entirely. For a moment, the pallor and fatigue of illness receded, replaced by pure hope. "Really? You promise?" "I promise," he said, and he meant it with every fiber of his being. As Maxwell left the hospital that afternoon, his mind was a whirlwind of thoughts and emotions. The possibility that had taken root couldn't be dismissed as mere fantasy. The timing, the resemblance, the inexplicable connection he felt, all pointed to a truth he both feared and desperately wanted to confirm. Back in his penthouse overlooking Boston Harbor, Maxwell paced the floor, replaying every detail of his relationship with Sarah. They had been separated for several months before her disappearance, their once passionate love having crumbled under the weight of his workaholic tendencies and her growing depression. The last time he'd seen her, they'd argued bitterly. 2 days later, she vanished without a trace, leaving behind only a short note that said, "I need to find myself. Please don't look for me." Respecting her wishes had been the hardest thing he'd ever done, but he'd complied. Now he wondered if that had been his greatest mistake. The next morning, Maxwell arrived at the hospital carrying a small, stuffed bear. He found Emily sitting up in bed, a nurse braiding her thin hair. When she saw him, her entire face transformed. "You came back," she exclaimed as if she couldn't quite believe it. "I promised, didn't I?" Maxwell replied, handing her the bear. "This is for you." Emily hugged the toy to her chest, her eyes shining. "No one's ever given me a present before, not just for me." Those simple words shattered something inside Maxwell. In that moment he made a silent vow. Whether or not this child was who he suspected her to be, he would ensure she never felt unwanted again. As days turned into weeks, Maxwell became a fixture at Emily's bedside. He rearranged his entire schedule, delegating business responsibilities to his executive team, much to the chagrin of his longtime friend and legal counsel, William Harrington. "You've barely been in the office, Max," William said during one of their phone calls. "The board is getting anxious. This isn't like you." "Things change, Will," Maxwell replied, watching Emily as she drew pictures in a sketchbook he'd brought her. "Some things are more important than quarterly reports." What Maxwell didn't share with William was his growing suspicion, no, his certainty, that Emily was his daughter. A daughter he never knew existed, a daughter who needed him now more than ever. And he was determined to uncover the truth, no matter what secrets it might reveal. William Harrington's office at the Bennett Industries headquarters towered 52 stories above downtown Boston, offering a panoramic view of the city that had made Maxwell Bennett a billionaire. Yet today, William barely noticed the vista as he paced the polished floors, phone pressed to his ear. "Look, I understand you're concerned," he said, his voice carefully measured despite the tension evident in his posture. "But I need absolute discretion on this. No one can know you're investigating, especially not Maxwell." On the other end of the line, a private investigator assured him of his secrecy before disconnecting. William placed the phone down on his immaculate desk and sank into his leather chair, loosening his tie. For 23 years, William had been more than just Maxwell Bennett's attorney. He'd been his right hand, his confidant, the architect of many of the company's most profitable ventures. He'd helped transform a promising tech startup into a global empire. And all along, he'd been careful, methodical, ensuring that his own interests remained protected. Now, this child threatened everything. William opened his laptop and accessed a hidden folder containing documents he'd hoped would never need to be revisited. Records of Sarah Bennett's final months, medical reports, financial transactions, the carefully constructed paper trail that had ensured the newborn baby girl would disappear into the system without a trace. He'd convinced himself it was for Maxwell's own good. The man had been devastated by Sarah's deteriorating mental health, their separation, and then her sudden disappearance. A child would have complicated the grieving process, distracted him from the business that needed his full attention. At least that's what William had told himself as he'd made the necessary arrangements. But in truth, William had acted to protect his own position. A child, an heir, would have altered everything, including the carefully crafted succession plan that would eventually place him at the helm of Bennett Industries. And now, against all odds, father and daughter had found each other. Across town, Maxwell sat in Dr. Catherine Morgan's office at Massachusetts General Hospital, listening intently as she explained Emily's condition. Acute lymphoblastic leukemia, Dr. Morgan said, her kind eyes softening the clinical terminology. It's the most common form of childhood leukemia and typically has a good prognosis with proper treatment. But, Maxwell prompted, sensing the hesitation in her voice. But Emily's case is particularly aggressive. She hasn't responded well, had a standard protocols. The chemotherapy is taking a severe toll on her system without producing the results we'd hoped for. Maxwell leaned forward, elbows on his knees. What are the alternatives? There are experimental treatments, clinical trials, Dr. Morgan replied, shuffling through Emily's file. But spaces are limited, and the qualification criteria are stringent. I don't care what it costs or what strings need to be pulled, Maxwell said, his voice resolute. I want her to have the best possible chance. Dr. Morgan studied him with a mixture of compassion and curiosity. Mr. Bennett, forgive me for asking, but why this particular child? You fund our pediatric ward generously, but I've never seen you take such a personal interest before. Maxwell hesitated, unsure how much to reveal. I believe Emily might be my daughter. The doctor's eyebrows rose. Does Emily know this? Not yet. I need to be certain first. I've scheduled DNA testing, but in the meantime I've filed for emergency temporary guardianship through my attorney. The orphanage has agreed given the circumstances. I see, Dr. Morgan nodded. Well, regardless of the biological connection, it's clear Emily has formed an attachment to you. In my professional opinion, that relationship alone could be beneficial to her recovery. Children often respond better to treatment when they have strong emotional support. After leaving Dr. Morgan's office, Maxwell made his way to Emily's room, his mind racing with plans. He found her sitting up in bed, watching a cartoon on the small television mounted on the wall. Hey there, he said, smiling as he entered. Emily's face brightened immediately. Max, I was hoping you'd come today. Look what Nurse Jenny gave me. She held up a colorful friendship bracelet. She showed me how to make them. I made one for you too. She reached for a small blue and green braided band on her nightstand. Maxwell sat on the edge of her bed, deeply touched as she tied the homemade bracelet around his wrist. I'll treasure this, he said, his voice thick with emotion. How are you feeling today? Emily shrugged. Okay, I guess. The doctor said I need to be strong for some new medicine they're going to try. That's right, Maxwell confirmed, carefully choosing his words. And I'm going to be right here with you through all of it. Emily tilted her head, studying him with eyes too wise for her years. Why? You don't even know me. The question caught Maxwell off guard. but he recognized the opportunity it presented. "Actually, Emily, there's something I'd like to talk to you about, something important." He explained in simple terms that he had reason to believe they might be related, that she might in fact be his daughter. He watched her face carefully as he spoke, trying to gauge her reaction. "Is that why you look at me sometimes like you're seeing someone else?" Emily asked perceptively. Maxwell nodded, surprised by her insight. "You remind me very much of someone I cared about deeply. Your mother, I think." "My mother," Emily repeated the words as if tasting them for the first time. "What was she like?" "She was beautiful," Maxwell said, memories flooding back. "Kind, artistic, with a laugh that could light up a room. She loved the ocean and rainy days and chocolate ice cream with rainbow sprinkles." "I like chocolate ice cream too," Emily said solemnly, "but I've never seen the ocean." "Well," Maxwell said, his decision made in that moment. "Once you're feeling better, I'll take you. We'll go to the Cape or Maine or anywhere you want. Promise what I promise." As they talked, neither noticed the figure pausing outside Emily's room. William Harrington observed the scene with narrowed eyes before continuing down the corridor, phone already in hand. The next morning, Maxwell sat in a sterile examination room at a private medical facility, rolling up his sleeve as a technician prepared to draw blood for the DNA test. His phone buzzed with a message from William. "Urgent matter requires your attention. Board meeting called for tomorrow. Please confirm attendance." Maxwell frowned, typing a quick response. "Can't make it. Reschedule for next week." Seconds later, his phone rang. "Max, you can't keep putting this off," William said without preamble when Maxwell answered. "The Peterson merger is at a critical stage. The board is getting restless. Your absence is being noticed." "Handle it, Will. That's why I pay you the obscene amount I do," Maxwell replied, wincing slightly as the needle entered his vein. "I have more important matters right now. This child, her name is Emily." "Fine, Emily. I understand she's captured your interest, your sympathy even, but you're allowing emotion to cloud your judgment. The company needs you. Your employees need you. And Emily needs me more," Maxwell said firmly. "I'll call you tomorrow." He ended the call, unable to shake a strange feeling of unease. William had been his closest friend and advisor for over 2 decades, yet something in his tone felt off. Too insistent, too controlling. Later that afternoon, as he sat beside Emily's bed reading her a story, a nurse brought in a manila envelope. "This just arrived for you, Mr. Bennett, marked urgent." Inside was a preliminary report from a private investigator he'd hired to look into the circumstances of Emily's abandonment. Maxwell scanned the document, his heart racing as he read. Records indicate infant female was admitted to Boston Memorial Hospital on March 17, 2018, the same date as Sarah Bennett's reported disappearance. Birth mother listed as Jane Doe, claimed unconscious upon arrival. Baby transferred to social services following day. Hospital administrator, who authorized transfer, Dr. James Collins, currently employed by Bennett Medical Research Division. Maxwell's blood ran cold. Bennett Medical Research, a subsidiary of his own company. The coincidence was too great. This was the first tangible connection between Sarah, Emily, and his own organization. His phone buzzed again, a text from the DNA testing facility. "Results expedited as requested. Available tomorrow 9 a.m. Maxwell looked at Emily, now dozing peacefully after her afternoon medication. The pieces were starting to fall into place, but the picture they formed raised more questions than answers. Who had orchestrated Emily's separation from her mother? Who had ensured she would disappear into the foster care system? And most importantly, who had kept her existence a secret from him for 7 long years? As night fell over Boston, Maxwell made a silent vow to uncover the truth. No matter how painful it might be, no matter whose loyalties it might call into question, for Emily's sake and for Sarah's memory, he would find answers, and someone would be held accountable. The DNA testing facility occupied the entire 15th floor of a sleek glass building in Cambridge's biotech corridor. Maxwell arrived precisely at 9, having barely slept the night before. His mind had raced with possibilities, with hopes and fears that had kept him staring at the ceiling until dawn broke over the Boston skyline. Dr. Elaine Chen, the facility's director, greeted him personally, guiding him to a private consultation room. Her expression gave nothing away as she placed a sealed envelope on the polished table between them. "The results are conclusive, Mr. Bennett," she said, her voice professionally neutral. "The probability of paternity is 99.9997%. Emily is unquestionably your biological daughter." Even though he had suspected, had felt it in his bones from the moment he saw her, hearing the scientific confirmation struck Maxwell with the force of a physical blow. He closed his eyes briefly, emotions washing over him in powerful waves. Vindication, joy, rage at the lost years, and overwhelming guilt for not having somehow known, for not having searched harder for Sarah. "Thank you, Dr. Chen," he managed, his voice barely steady. "There's something else," she added, sliding a second document across the table. "Since you requested a comprehensive genetic analysis, we also identified markers consistent with a rare genetic variant that affects how Emily's body processes certain types of medications. This could be critically important information for her oncology team." Maxwell's focus sharpened instantly. "How so?" "This particular variant might explain why she hasn't responded well to standard chemotherapy protocols. With this information, her doctors could potentially adjust her treatment regimen, possibly improving her outcomes significantly." Within the hour, Maxwell was sitting across from Dr. Morgan at Massachusetts General. The genetic report spread between them. The oncologist's expression grew increasingly animated as she studied the findings. "This changes everything," she said, reaching for her phone. "There's a clinical trial at Dana-Farber specifically targeting patients with this genetic profile. It's showing promising results, but spaces are extremely limited." "Get her in," Maxwell said without hesitation, "whatever it takes." Dr. Morgan raised an eyebrow. "Mr. Bennett, I understand your determination, but there are protocols, waiting lists." "I don't care," Maxwell interrupted, leaning forward. "I've just discovered that my daughter has been kept from me for 7 years. During that time, she's been shuttled between foster homes, diagnosed with an aggressive cancer, and left to face it all alone. I will not, cannot, stand by and watch her suffer any longer when there might be a treatment that could help her." His voice broke slightly on the final words, and Dr. Morgan's expression softened. "I'll make some calls," she promised. "In the meantime, I think you have some news to share with Emily." Emily was sitting up in bed when Maxwell arrived at her room, a child psychologist named Dr. Patel beside her. They had agreed this would be the best approach, having a professional present to help Emily process the life-altering information. "Hey, Max," Emily called cheerfully when she saw him. "Dr. Patel brought me a new book about space. Did you know there are planets where it rains diamonds?" Maxwell smiled, settling into the chair beside her bed. "That sounds amazing. Maybe we can read it together later. Right now, though, I have something important to talk to you about." With gentle guidance from Dr. Patel, Maxwell explained the DNA test results, watching Emily's expressive face as she absorbed the news. Her initial reaction was stunned silence, followed by a furrowing of her brow as she processed the information. "So, you really are my dad?" she asked finally, her voice small and uncertain. "Yes," Maxwell confirmed, fighting to keep his own emotions in check. "I am." "And you didn't know all this time?" "No, sweetheart. If I had known about you, I would have moved heaven and earth to find you." Emily was quiet for a long moment, plucking at a loose thread on her blanket. "What? About my mom? Where is she?" Maxwell exchanged a glance with Dr. Patel before answering carefully. "Your mother's name was Sarah. She went missing 7 years ago, right around the time you were born. I've been trying to find out what happened to her ever since." "Was she nice?" Emily asked, looking up with Sarah's eyes. "She was wonderful," Maxwell said softly. "Creative, kind, with a heart bigger than the whole world. And she would have loved you so much, Emily. I know that with absolute certainty." Emily absorbed this, then asked the question Maxwell had been dreading. "So what happens now?" "Well," he said, reaching for her small hand, "if it's okay with you, I'd like to be your dad, not just biologically, but in every way that matters. I've already started the legal process to become your guardian, and eventually if you want to adopt you formally." Emily's eyes widened. "You mean I would live with you? In your house?" "That's right. Once you're well enough to leave the hospital." "Would I have my own room?" Maxwell smiled. "Absolutely. You can decorate it any way you like." Emily's face lit up briefly before doubt crept back in. "But what if I don't get better?" The question hit Maxwell like a physical blow. Before he could formulate a response, Dr. Patel intervened, gently. "Emily, remember what we talked about? It's okay to have those fears, but right now your doctors are working very hard to find the best treatment for you." "Actually," Maxwell added, "that's the other news I wanted to share. The DNA test showed something important about your body that might help your doctors treat your illness better. Dr. Morgan is already working on getting you into a special program that could help you much more than your current medicine." Emily processed this information, her face showing a cautious optimism that tugged at Maxwell's heart. "So I might actually get better? For real?" "That's what we're all working toward," Maxwell assured her. "And I'll be with you every step of the way." After the emotional conversation, Dr. Patel suggested Emily might need some time to process everything. Maxwell agreed, promising to return that evening, and headed to his office for the first time in weeks. He found William waiting in his private elevator lobby, tension evident in every line of his body. "Finally," William said, falling into step beside him as Maxwell strode toward his office. "We need to talk, Max. The board is in uproar. The Peterson deal is stalling. And now I hear rumors you're filing for guardianship of some hospital charity case?" Maxwell stopped abruptly, turning to face his longtime friend and advisor. "That charity case is my daughter, Will. The DNA results came back this morning. Emily is Sarah's child, our child." William's face paled visibly, a reaction that didn't escape Maxwell's notice. That's impossible," he stammered. "Sarah wasn't pregnant when she disappeared." "Apparently she was," Maxwell countered, studying William's expression closely. "And somehow that information was kept from me. Emily was born the very day Sarah vanished, Will, at Boston Memorial, where our company's medical division has a significant presence. Quite a coincidence, wouldn't you say?" William adjusted his tie, his composure returning in increments. "Max, you need to tread carefully here. If this gets out, a secret love child suddenly appearing, the press will have a field day. The company stock could take a hit. Your reputation—" "I don't give a damn about my reputation," Maxwell cut him off sharply. "I care about my daughter, who has spent 7 years in the system when she should have been with me. Someone orchestrated that, Will. Someone made sure I never knew she existed." William held his gaze, something unreadable flickering in his eyes. "What exactly are you implying?" "I'm not implying anything yet," Maxwell replied evenly. "But I intend to find out exactly what happened 7 years ago. And when I do, there will be consequences." The tension between them was palpable, crackling like electricity in the air. After a long moment, William nodded stiffly. "I understand you're upset. This is a lot to process. But don't let emotion cloud your judgment, Max. You have responsibilities beyond this one child." "She's not just this one child," Maxwell said quietly. "She's my child, and right now she needs me more than anyone else does." He brushed past William into his office, closing the door firmly behind him. Once alone, he sank into his chair, the weight of the morning's revelations settling heavily on his shoulders. Emily was his daughter. The confirmation should have been purely joyful, but instead, it opened a Pandora's box of troubling questions. His phone rang. Dr. Morgan from Mass General. "Mr. Bennett, I have good news," she said without preamble. "I've spoken with the team at Dana-Farber. Given Emily's genetic profile and the aggressive nature of her condition, they've agreed to admit her to the trial program immediately. We can transfer her as soon as tomorrow." Relief flooded through him. "That's wonderful news, Doctor. Thank you." "There's more," Dr. Morgan continued. The trial is testing a revolutionary targeted therapy developed by Nexus Biotech. Preliminary results have been remarkable, with remission rates far exceeding standard treatments for patients with Emily's specific genetic markers. Maxwell froze, his grip tightening on the phone. Did you say Nexus Biotech? Yes, they're at the forefront of personalized cancer treatments. Why do you ask? Maxwell opened his laptop, quickly pulling up a file of Bennett Industries' investment portfolio. There it was, Nexus Biotech, a startup that had received substantial funding from his company 3 years ago, championed by none other than William Harrington, who now sat on their board of directors. No reason, Maxwell replied, his mind racing. Please proceed with the transfer arrangements. I'll be there tomorrow morning. As he hung up, Maxwell stared at the Nexus Biotech investment summary on his screen. Another connection, another thread in a web that was becoming increasingly complex and increasingly disturbing. William had pushed hard for this investment, insisting on unusual terms that gave him personal oversight rather than standard corporate governance. At the time, Maxwell had thought nothing of it. William had always had a keen eye for promising biotech ventures. Now he wondered what else his trusted advisor might have been keeping from him. Dana-Farber Cancer Institute stood as a beacon of hope amid Boston's Longwood medical area, its modern architecture bathed in early morning sunlight as Maxwell escorted Emily through its entrance. The child clutched her stuffed bear in one arm, her other hand firmly grasping Maxwell's as they followed Dr. Karen Winters, the lead researcher on the clinical trial. We've prepared a special room for Emily, Dr. Winters explained, leading them down a corridor decorated with colorful murals of forests and magical creatures. We try to make the environment as comfortable as possible for our younger patients. Emily's eyes widened as they entered her new room. Unlike the sterile hospital space she'd known at Mass General, this one had been thoughtfully designed with a child in mind. Walls painted a soft blue, a small bookshelf filled with children's books, and a window seat overlooking a garden. What do you think? Maxwell asked, watching her reaction carefully. Emily moved slowly around the space, touching the patchwork quilt on the bed, examining the small desk in the corner. It's pretty, she said softly. Is this really all for me? All for you, Dr. Winters confirmed with a warm smile. And there's a recreation room down the hall where you can meet other kids in the program when you're feeling up to it. As Dr. Winters outlined the treatment schedule, Maxwell noticed how Emily's posture gradually relaxed, her initial apprehension giving way to cautious optimism. The doctor explained in child-friendly terms how the new medicine worked, using a tablet to show animated illustrations that made complex science accessible. So this medicine is special just for me? Emily asked, her natural curiosity emerging. That's right, Dr. Winters nodded. We've learned that everyone's body is a little different, like fingerprints. This treatment is designed to work specifically with your unique body chemistry. Like a key that fits only your lock, Maxwell added, earning an approving nod from the doctor. After Emily was settled in and the initial assessment completed, Maxwell stepped into the hallway to take a call from his private investigator, Michael Reeves. I've got something, Reeves said without preamble. Pulled some strings with a contact at Boston Memorial. Accessed the archived records from the night Sarah was admitted 7 years ago. She came in unconscious, severe preeclampsia. Emergency C-section performed to save the baby. Maxwell leaned against the wall, his heart pounding. And Sarah? What happened to her? That's where it gets strange. Records show she was transferred to the ICU in critical but stable condition, then nothing. No discharge record, no transfer documentation, nothing. It's like she vanished from the hospital system. That's impossible, Maxwell said, his voice barely above a whisper. Patients don't just disappear from hospitals. They do if someone alters the records, Reeves countered. And get this, the attending physician that night was Dr. James Collins, the same one who signed off on transferring the baby to social services. Collins, Maxwell repeated, the name now familiar. He works for Bennett Medical Research now. Exactly. Started there about 6 months after Sarah's disappearance. Substantial salary increase, impressive title. Man made quite a leap in his career. Maxwell's jaw tightened. I need to speak with him. already working on setting that up. But there's something else. The hospital visitor logs from that night show one non-medical professional visiting the maternity ward after hours, William Harrington. The revelation hit Maxwell like a physical blow. William had been there the night Emily was born, the night Sarah vanished. And he had never mentioned it, not once in 7 years. "Keep digging," Maxwell instructed Reeves. "I want everything you can find on Collins, and I want to know exactly what William was doing at that hospital." Returning to Emily's room, Maxwell found her already engrossed in conversation with a nurse who was setting up her first treatment. He marveled at her resilience, how quickly she adapted to new environments, how bravely she faced each new challenge. In those moments, he saw Sarah's strength in her, a legacy that transcended the years of separation. Over the following days, Maxwell established a new routine centered entirely around Emily. He converted a conference room at Dana-Farber into a makeshift office, conducting essential business remotely while remaining within quick reach of his daughter. When Emily felt well enough, they explored the Institute's gardens in a wheelchair, Maxwell pointing out different birds and plants, watching her face light up with each new discovery. In the evenings, they established rituals that became precious to them both, reading adventures, sharing simple meals when Emily's appetite allowed, and what they came to call question time, when Emily could ask anything about her mother or Maxwell's life, and he would answer with complete honesty. "Did you love my mom?" Emily asked one evening as twilight painted the Boston skyline in shades of lavender and gold. Maxwell smiled, memories washing over him. "Very much. We met in college. She was studying art, and I was this nerdy engineering student who couldn't believe someone so vibrant and creative would give me the time of day. Why did you stop being together?" Emily's directness, so like Sarah's, never failed to catch him off guard. Maxwell considered how to frame the complex truth for a 7-year-old. Sometimes, even when people love each other, they have trouble making each other happy. "I was working too much, building my company, and your mom needed more than I was giving her." Emily nodded sagely. "Sister Margaret at the orphanage said that happens sometimes. That's why some kids come to live there." "Your mom would have never willingly given you up," Maxwell said firmly, needing Emily to understand this fundamental truth. "Never. Something happened that prevented her from keeping you, but it wasn't because she didn't want you." The conviction in his voice seemed to comfort Emily. She leaned against him, her small body warm against his side. "I wish I could have known her." "I wish that too, sweetheart," Maxwell whispered, kissing the top of her head. "But she gave me you, and that's the greatest gift anyone has ever given me." As Emily's treatment progressed, Maxwell observed small but significant improvements. Her blood work showed promising responses to the experimental therapy. Her energy levels gradually increased, and the color returned to her cheeks. Dr. Winters cautioned against premature optimism, but acknowledged that Emily was responding better than anticipated. "The Nexus protocol is specifically designed for patients with her genetic profile," Dr. Winters explained during one of their weekly consultations. "It's as if the treatment was created with someone exactly like Emily in mind." The comment struck Maxwell as odd. But before he could pursue it, his phone buzzed with a text from Reeves. "Found Collins. Meeting set for tomorrow, 2 p.m. That night, after Emily had fallen asleep, Maxwell returned to his penthouse to prepare for the confrontation ahead. He hadn't been home in days, and the space felt cavernous and empty after the intimate warmth of Emily's hospital room. On impulse, he entered the storage room where he'd carefully packed away Sarah's belongings after her disappearance, unable to part with them, but too pained to keep them in sight. Among the boxes, he found her sketchbooks, dozens of them filled with her distinctive drawings and paintings. Sarah had been talented, her work capturing not just images but emotions. Maxwell sat on the floor, carefully turning the pages of the most recent book, the one she'd been working on before she vanished. Midway through, he stopped, his breath catching. The sketch showed a nursery, meticulously detailed, a crib by a window, a rocking chair, shelves lined with stuffed animals. In the corner, Sarah had written a single word: hope. She had been planning for their child, preparing, dreaming. Maxwell closed the sketchbook, a new determination hardening within him. Someone had stolen those dreams from Sarah, from Emily, from him, and he was increasingly certain that William Harrington knew far more than he'd ever let on. The next morning, Maxwell arrived at Dana-Farber earlier than usual, bringing with him a surprise, a small watercolor set and sketchbook, similar to the ones Sarah had used. "Your mother was an artist," he explained as Emily examined the gift with reverent fingers. "I thought you might enjoy trying it." Emily's face lit up. "Will you show me how?" "I'm afraid I'm terrible at art," Maxwell admitted with a laugh, "but we can learn together." They spent the morning painting, Maxwell's clumsy attempts at landscapes contrasting with Emily's surprisingly intuitive use of color and form. Watching her concentrate, tongue caught between her teeth, just as Sarah used to do, Maxwell felt an ache of recognition so profound it nearly overwhelmed him. At one point, a nurse paused in the doorway, smiling at the scene. "You two look so much alike when you're concentrating," she commented before continuing on her rounds. The casual observation struck Maxwell deeply. People were beginning to see what he felt, the undeniable connection between them that transcended the years of separation. They were becoming a family, knitting together the torn fabric of what should have been. As the time approached for his meeting with Dr. Collins, Maxwell reluctantly prepared to leave, promising Emily he'd return before dinner. "Can we have macaroni and cheese?" she asked hopefully. It had become her favorite meal on days when her appetite was good. "Absolutely," Maxwell agreed, kissing her forehead. "And maybe ice cream for dessert if Dr. Winters says it's okay." Emily beamed, already reaching for her new art supplies to continue painting while he was gone. "I'm going to make something special for you while you're out." As Maxwell headed toward the elevator, his phone rang, William Harrington's name flashing on the screen. Maxwell hesitated, then declined the call. Whatever William wanted, it could wait. Today, Maxwell was finally going to get some answers about what had happened 7 years ago. And nothing, not William, not his company, not anything in the world, was going to stop him from uncovering the truth about the night he lost Sarah and the daughter he never knew he had. Dr. James Collins had chosen a small coffee shop 3 blocks from Bennett Medical Research for their meeting, public enough to discourage a scene, private enough for sensitive conversation. Maxwell spotted him immediately, mid-50s, thinning, grey hair, the nervous demeanor of a man who had carried a secret for far too long. "Mr. Bennett," Collins acknowledged as Maxwell slid into the booth across from him. "I've been expecting this day for years." Maxwell studied the man, controlling the anger that threatened to boil over. "Then you know why I'm here." Collins nodded, his fingers fidgeting with a paper napkin. "Your daughter, Emily." He swallowed hard. "And Sarah." "Start talking," Maxwell said quietly, his tone leaving no room for evasion. "Everything, from the beginning." Collins drew a deep breath. 7 years ago, I was an attending physician at Boston Memorial, night shift in the ER. A woman was brought in unconscious, severe preeclampsia, 38 weeks pregnant. Her blood pressure was dangerously high, putting both her and the baby at risk. "Sarah," Maxwell supplied, his voice tight. "Yes, though I didn't know her name then. No ID, no phone, nothing to identify her. We performed an emergency C-section to save the baby, a healthy little girl despite the circumstances." Collins paused, visibly struggling. The mother stabilized initially but remained unconscious. "We admitted her to the ICU while social services took temporary custody of the infant." And then Collins met Maxwell's gaze directly for the first time. Then William Harrington showed up, said he represented the family, that he'd handle everything. He had paperwork, medical power of attorney, family authorization forms, everything needed to take control of the situation. Maxwell's blood ran cold. Forged documents. "I realize that now," Collins admitted, "but at the time they looked legitimate. And Harrington was persuasive." "Persuasive how?" Collins flinched at the directness of the question. "He knew about my gambling debts, knew I was about to lose everything. He offered a solution, a position at Bennett Medical Research, substantial salary, all my debts cleared. All I had to do was follow his instructions regarding the patient and her child, which were to alter the records, create a paper trail showing the mother had been discharged against medical advice, removing any connection between her and the baby. Collins stared down at his untouched coffee, and to ensure the infant was placed in the system with no identifying information. Fury rose in Maxwell's chest, threatening to choke him. What happened to Sarah after that? Harrington arranged for her transfer to a private facility. He said she needed specialized care, that it was in everyone's best interest. I didn't ask questions. I should have, but I didn't. What facility? Where? Collins shook his head. He never told me. Once the paperwork was processed, that was it. I never saw her again. Maxwell leaned forward, his voice dangerously soft. Do you understand what you did? You helped separate a mother from her child. You helped keep a father from knowing his daughter existed. For 7 years, Emily has been alone in the world because of what you did. I know, Collins whispered, anguish evident in his face. I've lived with it every day. When I saw in the company newsletter that you'd found her, that you were becoming her guardian, I knew it was only a matter of time before you came looking for answers. Why come forward now? Why agree to this meeting? Collins reached into his jacket, extracting a slim flash drive which he placed on the table between them. Because I kept records of my own. Insurance, I called it then. Conscience, I realize now. Everything I have on what happened that night, including copies of the original unaltered medical files, is on here. Maxwell picked up the drive, turning it over in his fingers. This doesn't absolve you. No, Collins agreed. Nothing could. But there's something else you should know. He hesitated, then continued. The Nexus protocol treating your daughter. It's not just similar to Sarah's genetic profile. It was derived from it. Maxwell froze. What are you saying? Harrington has been running a secret research division within Bennett Medical for years, using genetic material from Sarah to develop targeted cancer therapies, the treatment saving. Emily's life was literally created from her mother's DNA. The revelation staggered Maxwell. William hadn't just hidden Emily's existence. He'd been exploiting Sarah's genetic material for years, building a biotech fortune on the foundation of his betrayal. Why? Maxwell demanded. Why go to such lengths? Money, power, the Nexus. Protocols are worth billions. Personalized cancer treatments are the future of oncology. But there's more to it. Collins leaned closer. Harrington needed control of Bennett Industries. With you distracted by Sarah's disappearance, grieving and focused on finding her, he could gradually consolidate his position. A child would have complicated that plan, given you a reason to move forward to build a family legacy. The pieces fell into place with sickening clarity. William's insistence on handling the search for Sarah personally, his strategic positioning within the company during Maxwell's darkest days, his increasingly aggressive moves toward eventual succession. There's something else, Collins added, his voice dropping lower, something I only discovered recently when I gained access to the restricted research files. Sarah may still be alive. The words hit Maxwell like a physical blow. What? The private facility where Harrington Center specializes in long-term care for patients in persistent vegetative states. The last transfer record I found, dated 3 years ago, indicated a patient matching Sarah's description was moved to a facility called Lakewood Haven in western Massachusetts. Hope, terrible and wonderful, surged through Maxwell. You're certain? As certain as I can be without having seen her myself. The patient identifier matches the code Harrington used in the original transfer. Maxwell stood abruptly, unable to remain seated with the adrenaline coursing through him. If you're lying to me... I'm not, Collins interrupted. Everything I've told you is on that drive, including the Lakewood Haven transfer records. I'm done living with this secret, Mr. Bennett. Whatever happens to me now, I've made my peace with it. Leaving the coffee shop, Maxwell called Reeves immediately, instructing him to verify Collins' information about Lakewood Haven and prepare for a possible visit. His next call was to his head of security, authorizing immediate protection for Emily at 'No visitors without his explicit approval, no exceptions. As he drove back to the hospital, Maxwell's mind raced with implications. If Sarah was alive, if she had been kept in a care facility all these years without his knowledge, the depth of William's betrayal was beyond comprehension. And if the Nexus protocol treating Emily had been developed using Sarah's genetic material, the connection between mother and daughter extended beyond biology into the very treatment saving Emily's life. He arrived at Dana-Farber to find Emily, sitting up in bed, proudly displaying a watercolor painting she'd completed during his absence. A sunlit garden with a woman and child holding hands among vibrant flowers. "It's us," she explained. "But with Mom, too." I imagined what she might look like. Maxwell's throat tightened as he examined the painting. The female figure had Sarah's distinctive features, features Emily could only have intuited through some genetic memory, having never seen her mother's face. "It's beautiful, sweetheart," he managed, kissing the top of her head. "You have your mother's talent." Emily beamed at the comparison. "Dr. Winters came by. She said my numbers are better today." "That's wonderful news," Maxwell said, forcing enthusiasm into his voice despite the emotional turmoil within. "Did they bring your dinner yet?" "Not yet. Can we still have mac and cheese?" "Absolutely, I promised, didn't I?" As Emily chatted about her day, the art therapist who had visited, the other child she'd met briefly in the recreation room, Maxwell's phone vibrated with a text from Reeves. "Lakewood Haven exists. Remote location, high security, specialized in long-term care for wealthy clients, working on getting inside." Maxwell excused himself briefly, stepping into the hallway to make a call to his attorney, Jonathan Chen. "I need emergency injunctions. Prepared," he instructed, "freezing William Harrington's access to all Bennett Industries assets, accounts, and facilities, and I need them ready to file at a moment's notice." "Max, that's extreme," Chen cautioned. "William is your second-in-command, a board member, a major shareholder." "He's also the man who stole my daughter from me," Maxwell cut in, his voice cold, "and possibly kept Sarah hidden away for 7 years. I have evidence, Jonathan, substantial evidence." There was a moment of stunned silence before Chen responded, "I'll have the paperwork ready within the hour. But Max, be careful. If William realizes you're onto him before everything is in place..." "I know," Maxwell acknowledged. "That's why timing is critical. I'll contact you once I've confirmed the information about Sarah." Returning to Emily's room, Maxwell found her drowsy from her medication, the day's excitement catching up with her. He sat beside her bed, holding her small hand as she drifted towards sleep. "Dad," she murmured, the words still new and precious between them. "Yes, sweetheart." "Are you sad about something?" Maxwell hesitated, then answered honestly, "I'm thinking about your mum, about how much I miss her." Emily's eyes, heavy with approaching sleep, studied his face. "Do you think she misses us too?" The innocent question pierced Maxwell's heart. "I'm sure she does in her own way," he replied softly. "Maybe we'll find her someday," Emily whispered as her eyes closed completely. "Maybe we will," Maxwell agreed, watching his daughter slip into peaceful slumber. Outside the window, Boston's lights began to twinkle in the gathering dusk. Somewhere to the west, in a facility hidden among the Berkshire mountains, Sarah might be waiting, unreachable for 7 long years, yet potentially within his grasp now. Maxwell's phone vibrated again, William calling for the 5th time that day. This time Maxwell answered. "Max, finally." William's voice carried its usual smooth confidence. "We need to talk about the Peterson merger. The board is meeting tomorrow, and your absence is becoming problematic." "Actually, Will," Maxwell replied, keeping his tone deliberately casual, "I think we need to discuss something much more important than the Peterson merger. Let's meet at my penthouse tonight, 9 o'clock. A brief hesitation. "Is something wrong?" "Not at all," Maxwell lied smoothly. "Just some developments with Emily's treatment I'd like to share with you, and some company restructuring ideas I've been considering." Restructuring? The edge of uncertainty in William's voice was satisfying. "Nothing dramatic," Maxwell assured him. "Just some thoughts about the future. 9 o'clock? I'll be there," William confirmed before disconnecting. Maxwell looked back at his sleeping daughter, the daughter William had kept from him for 7 years. By this time tomorrow he would have answers about Sarah, about the Nexus Protocol, about the full extent of his trusted friend's betrayal, and William Harrington would finally face the consequences of his actions. Rain lashed against the floor-to-ceiling windows of Maxwell's penthouse as he stood watching the storm roll across Boston Harbor. Lightning occasionally illuminated the city skyline, casting dramatic shadows through the minimalist space that had once felt like home, but now seemed like a stranger's dwelling. He checked his watch, 8:55 p.m. William would arrive any minute. Annie. The coffee table lay 2 items: Collins's flash drive, its contents now fully reviewed and backed up in multiple secure locations, and a single photograph of Sarah that Maxwell had kept on his desk for years. He lifted the picture, studying the face that had haunted his dreams for 7 years. The same face he now saw reflected in Emily's expressions, her gestures, the tilt of her head when she was curious about something. The penthouse intercom buzzed, pulling him from his thoughts. "Mr. Harrington has arrived, sir," his security guard announced. "Send him up," Maxwell replied, setting the photograph down precisely where William couldn't miss seeing it. William entered with his usual confidence, shaking raindrops from his overcoat. "Miserable night," he commented, hanging the coat in the entryway, "but worth braving the storm for a chance to actually speak with you. You've been quite the ghost these past weeks." "I've been where I needed to be," Maxwell replied, not offering to take William's briefcase or pour him a drink as he normally would. "With my daughter." If William noticed the coolness in Maxwell's tone, he gave no indication. "Yes, the child. How is she responding to the treatment?" "Her name is Emily," Maxwell corrected, his voice hardening slightly. "And she's responding remarkably well. The Nexus Protocol seems almost perfectly calibrated to her genetic profile, almost as if it were designed specifically for her." William nodded, moving toward the bar cart. "Fascinating how these personalized treatments work. Mind if I pour myself a scotch? Seems like that kind of night." "Help yourself," Maxwell said, watching as William selected the 30-year-old Macallan they'd often shared during late-night strategy sessions. "You mentioned restructuring ideas?" William prompted, settling into his usual armchair, seemingly at ease. Maxwell remained standing. "Yes, I've been thinking about legacy, about what we leave behind, about trust." William's expression remained pleasant, but Maxwell noticed the slight tensing of his shoulders. "All important considerations for a company of our size." "I wasn't talking about the company, Will." Maxwell picked up the photograph of Sarah, turning it so William could see it clearly. "I was talking about personal legacy, about the people we love, the people we betray." The change in William's expression was subtle but unmistakable, a momentary flicker of alarm quickly masked by practiced composure. "I'm not sure I follow." Maxwell placed the photograph back on the table next to the flash drive. 7 years ago, Sarah was admitted to Boston Memorial Hospital, pregnant and unconscious. She gave birth to a healthy baby girl, my daughter, and then, according to hospital records that were subsequently altered, she checked herself out against medical advice and vanished. William sipped his scotch, his expression carefully neutral. "You've been over this 1,000 times, Max. The police investigation found nothing. The private investigators found nothing. Sarah disappeared." "Yes," Maxwell agreed, his voice dangerously calm. "But what those investigations didn't uncover, what I didn't know to look for, was your presence at the hospital that night." The silence that followed was absolute, broken only by the distant rumble of thunder. "I don't know what you're talking about," William finally said, but the slight tremor in his voice betrayed him. Maxwell picked up the flash drive. "Dr. James Collins remembers differently, as does the hospital visitor log, which shows you signed in at 11:42 p.m. and departed at 3:17 a.m. Interesting hours for a corporate attorney to be visiting a hospital where his friend's ex-girlfriend has just given birth, wouldn't you say?" William set his glass down carefully. "Max, whatever Collins told you—" "Don't," Maxwell cut him off sharply. "Don't insult me with denials. I have everything, Will. The original unaltered medical records. The falsified discharge papers with your fingerprints all over them. The financial transactions showing how you paid off Collins to cooperate. The trail leading from Boston Memorial to a private long-term care facility in Western Massachusetts. William's face had gone pale, but his voice remained steady. You don't understand what you're dealing with. Then explain it to me, Maxwell challenged, finally sitting down across from the man who had been his closest friend and advisor for over 2 decades. Explain why you hid my daughter from me for 7 years. Explain why you've kept Sarah's condition a secret. Explain the Nexus protocols. At the mention of Nexus, William's composure faltered visibly. How much do you know? Everything, Maxwell bluffed, watching carefully for William's reaction. But I want to hear it from you. All of it. Every betrayal. Every lie. William was silent for a long moment, calculating, weighing his options. Finally, he drained his scotch in a single swallow and placed the glass deliberately on the table. It started as protection, he began, his voice taking on a detached, almost clinical tone. Sarah was unstable in those final months, you know. That better than anyone. The pregnancy was unexpected, unplanned, she was going to tell you, but then came the diagnosis. What diagnosis? Maxwell demanded, his heart racing. Early onset frontotemporal dementia, rare in someone so young but aggressive. The prognosis was poor, rapid cognitive decline, personality changes, eventually complete dependence. William met Maxwell's gaze directly. She didn't want you to know, didn't want your pity or your obligation. She came to me for legal advice about setting up care directives, planning for the inevitable. Maxwell struggled to process this information. And the preeclampsia? A complication of the pregnancy, unrelated to the dementia. When she collapsed and was taken to the hospital, I was her legal medical proxy. Her choice, not mine. The doctors performed the emergency C-section, but the stress triggered a massive cerebral event. She never regained consciousness. And you decided what? That I didn't deserve to know any of this? That I didn't deserve to know I had a daughter? Maxwell's voice rose despite his efforts to remain calm. William leaned forward. You were devastated by the breakup, Max. The company was at a critical expansion phase. I made a judgment call to spare you the double burden of a permanently unconscious ex-girlfriend and a newborn child when you were already barely functioning. That wasn't your call to make, Maxwell said, his voice deadly quiet. Perhaps not, William conceded, but once made there was no going back. And then, about a year later, something unexpected happened. Sarah's blood samples, preserved during her hospitalization, showed remarkable properties, genetic markers that could potentially revolutionize cancer treatment. The research division had been struggling with targeted therapies for years, and suddenly here was this perfect test case. So you used her, Maxwell said flatly. You kept her hidden away in a care facility and exploited her genetic material to develop Nexus. I saw an opportunity, William corrected. An opportunity to create something meaningful from tragedy. The Nexus protocols have saved hundreds of lives already, with thousands more to come, including, ironically, your daughters. The casual way William referenced Emily made Maxwell's blood boil. Where is Sarah now? William hesitated, then answered, Lakewood Haven. She's been there for the past 3 years, receiving the best possible care. In a persistent vegetative state, Maxwell pressed. A fleeting expression crossed William's face, something Maxwell couldn't quite identify. Her condition is complex. Meaning that while she hasn't regained full consciousness, there have been signs of awareness, minimal responses to stimuli, nothing the doctors would classify as meaningful recovery, but enough to justify continued care and observation. Hope, fragile but insistent, bloomed in Maxwell's chest. She's responsive? Minimally, William emphasized. Don't build this up into something it's not, Max. The woman you knew is gone. What remains is a shadow, valuable for her genetic contribution to medical science, but not... Don't. Maxwell cut him off, his voice like ice. Don't reduce her to a research subject. She is Emily's mother. She was the woman I loved. And you've kept her from us both for 7 years. William spread his hands in a placating gesture. What would you have done differently? Raised a child as a single father while running a global corporation and visiting the unconscious mother in a care facility. How would that have served anyone's interests? It wasn't your decision to make, Maxwell repeated, each word precise and cutting. No, William agreed surprisingly. It wasn't, but I made it and here we are. He glanced at his watch. So what happens now? You've assembled your evidence. You clearly have your moral outrage. Are you going to have me arrested, destroy the company we built together? And for what? To satisfy your anger? No, Maxwell said, rising to his feet. I'm going to take my daughter to meet her mother. I'm going to bring Sarah home where she belongs with the best private care money can buy. And as for you, he paused, staring down at the man who had betrayed him so completely. You're going to sign over your interest in Nexus Biotech to a trust benefiting pediatric cancer research. You're going to resign from Bennett Industries, effective immediately, and you're going to provide complete, detailed documentation of every aspect of Sarah's condition and treatment for the past 7 years. William's expression hardened. And if I refuse? Then I'll use every resource at my disposal to ensure you spend the rest of your life in prison for medical fraud, identity theft, falsification of medical records, and whatever other charges. My legal team can compile. The choice is yours. You need me, William said, a note of desperation creeping into his voice. The Peterson merger, the European expansion, you can't manage those alone. Watch me, Maxwell replied simply. The standoff lasted several tense seconds before William looked away. I'll need time to prepare the documentation, arrange the transfer of Nexus shares. You have until tomorrow morning. My attorneys will meet you at your office at 9 a.m. Maxwell moved toward the door, indicating their meeting was concluded. And Will? If you attempt to destroy records, transfer assets, or otherwise obstruct this process, I'll know. I have people at Nexus, at Bennett Medical, and at Lakewood Haven as of this afternoon. William stood slowly, a defeated man. You've thought of everything. I learned from the best, Maxwell said without humor. Now get out of my home. After William departed, Maxwell poured himself a scotch with slightly trembling hands. The revelations of the evening had been even more staggering than he'd anticipated. Sarah, alive all these years, her condition not hopeless, as William had implied, but showing signs of awareness. The Nexus protocols developed from her genetic material now saving their daughter's life. His phone rang, Reeves calling from outside Lakewood Haven. I've confirmed she's here, the investigator reported without preamble. Room 217. I couldn't get in to see her, security's tight, but I verified her presence through an orderly. They know her as Patient S. Any information on her condition? Nothing specific, but the facility specializes in traumatic brain, injuries and post-coma care. Not just warehousing patients, active treatment protocols, rehabilitation therapies. This isn't a place where they send people to be forgotten, Mr. Bennett. It's where they send people when they're hoping for recovery. The implications sent Maxwell's mind racing. If Sarah was receiving active treatment rather than just supportive care, there was reason to hope for improvement, perhaps significant improvement, in her condition. I'll be there tomorrow, Maxwell decided. Have your contact ready to get us in. After ending the call, Maxwell opened his laptop and began making arrangements. A medical transport team to bring Sarah back to Boston once he'd assessed her condition. Renovations to his rarely used Beacon Hill townhouse to accommodate specialized medical equipment. Consultations with the country's leading neurologists, specializing in traumatic brain injury and prolonged disorders of consciousness. As he worked through the night, a weight lifted from Maxwell's shoulders, the weight of not knowing, of searching without direction. Sarah was alive. Emily was responding to treatment. And for the first time in 7 years, the fragmented pieces of his life were beginning to realign into a coherent whole. Dawn was breaking over Boston Harbor when Maxwell finally closed his laptop. In a few hours, he would tell Emily that they were going on a journey to meet her mother. He didn't know what they would find at Lakewood Haven, didn't know if Sarah would recognize them or respond to them. But they would be together, the family that should have been all along, and that, he realized with startling clarity, was all that truly mattered. Lakewood Haven nestled among the Berkshire Mountains like a secret waiting to be discovered. The private medical facility's discreet entrance, marked only by a simple brass plaque, belied the state-of-the-art care provided within its walls. As Maxwell navigated the winding road leading to the main building, Emily gazed out the window from her car seat, eyes wide with wonder at the autumn foliage painting the landscape in brilliant hues of crimson and gold. "It's so pretty here," she remarked, her voice stronger than it had been in weeks. The experimental treatment was working, each day bringing noticeable improvements in her energy, her appetite, her zest for life. "Does Mom like trees?" Maxwell smiled at the way Emily had begun referring to Sarah as Mom, natural, unforced, as if she'd always known her. She loved them, especially in the fall. She used to take long drives up to Vermont just to see the leaves change. They had discussed their journey extensively with Dr. Winters and Emily's psychologist. Neither could predict how Emily might react to meeting a mother who might not respond to her, but both agreed that honesty was essential. Maxwell had explained Sarah's condition in terms Emily could understand, that her mother had been in a very deep sleep for a long time, that she might not be able to talk or move much, but that somewhere inside she might still hear them. "What if she doesn't know who I am?" Emily had asked the night before their departure. "Then we'll introduce ourselves," Maxwell had answered simply, "and we'll keep coming back, keep talking to her, until maybe one day she does." Now, as they pulled into the circular driveway of Lakewood Haven, Emily clutched her mother's sketchbook, a gift Maxwell had given her after explaining they were going to visit Sarah. Inside were drawings Sarah had made years ago, glimpses into her creative mind that Emily had studied with intense fascination. "Ready?" Maxwell asked, turning off the engine. Emily nodded solemnly. "Ready?" Dr. Elaine Winters, the facility's director, greeted them in the reception area, a warm, sunlit space designed to feel more like a luxury retreat than a medical institution. Maxwell had spoken with her at length by phone the previous day, explaining the extraordinary circumstances that had kept him unaware of Sarah's presence there. "Mr. Bennett, Emily," she said, bending slightly to address the child directly. "Welcome to Lakewood Haven. I've been looking forward to meeting you both." Emily, suddenly shy, pressed closer to Maxwell's side, but offered a small smile. "We've prepared Sarah for your visit," Dr. Winters continued, as she led them through the facility. "I want to emphasize that while she has shown some encouraging responses to stimuli in recent months, you should manage your expectations. Recovery from conditions like hers is unpredictable and often proceeds at its own pace." "What kinds of responses has she shown?" Maxwell asked, his voice carefully controlled. "Eye tracking, changes in respiration when music is played, some hand movement that appears purposeful rather than reflexive." Dr. Winters stopped outside a door marked 217. "These may seem small, but they represent significant neurological activity in someone with her history." Maxwell felt Emily's hand tighten around his. "Can we see her now?" the child asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Dr. Winters nodded. "She's right inside. Take as much time as you need. The nurse's station is just down the hall if you need anything." The room they entered was surprisingly homelike. Soft, natural light filtering through gauzy curtains, plants on the windowsill, framed nature photographs on the walls. And there, in a specially designed bed positioned to face the large windows, overlooking the mountains, lay Sarah. Maxwell's breath caught in his throat. 7 years had passed, yet he would have known her anywhere. Her hair, longer now and streaked with premature silver, framed a face thinner than he remembered, but still unmistakably hers. Medical equipment surrounded her bed, monitoring vital signs and providing necessary support, but the room had been arranged to minimize their clinical presence. Emily stood frozen in the doorway, her eyes wide as she took in the scene. Maxwell knelt beside her, one arm around her shoulders, It's okay, he murmured. We can take this slowly. Emily looked from her father to the still figure in the bed, then back again. She looks like me, she whispered, awe in her voice. Yes, Maxwell agreed, emotion thickening his voice. She does. Gathering. Her courage, Emily approached the bed, Maxwell following close behind. Hi, Mom, she said softly. I'm Emily. I'm your daughter. No visible response came from Sarah, but the heart rate monitor showed a slight acceleration, perhaps coincidence, perhaps not. Emily looked up at Maxwell, uncertainty in her eyes. He nodded encouragingly. Keep talking. Tell her about yourself. And so she did. With the natural storytelling ability of childhood, Emily perched carefully on the edge of the bed and shared her world with the mother she'd never known. She talked about her favorite books, the stuffed bear Maxwell had given her, her newfound love of painting. She described the hospital where she was getting better, the friends she'd made there, the ice cream sundae a kind nurse had snuck in for her birthday. Throughout Emily's monologue, Maxwell watched Sarah's face intently, searching for any sign of awareness. He thought he detected subtle changes, a slight tensing around her eyes when Emily laughed, a barely perceptible movement of fingers when Emily mentioned painting, but he couldn't be certain if he was seeing what he desperately wanted to see or actual responses. When Emily paused, Maxwell took his turn, sitting gently on the opposite side of the bed and taking Sarah's hand in his. Hello, Sarah, he said, his voice breaking slightly. It's been a long time. I've missed you every day. He paused, gathering himself. I found our daughter. She's incredible, brave and smart and creative, just like you. She's been fighting a tough battle, but she's winning. The doctors say she's responding better than they could have hoped to the treatment. As he spoke, Maxwell felt a slight pressure against his palm, so faint he might have imagined it, except that it happened again when he mentioned Emily's treatment. He glanced at Sarah's face and saw something that stopped his heart, a tear tracking slowly down her cheek. Emily, he said quietly, I think your mum can hear us. The child's eyes widened. Really? How do you know? Watch, Maxwell said, then spoke directly to Sarah again. Sarah, if you can hear me, try to squeeze my hand. The pressure came again, weak but unmistakable. Emily gasped, her face lighting up with wonder. She hears us. Dad, she hears us. She leaned closer to her mother. Mom, I brought something. Said her show you. It's your sketchbook. Dad gave it to me. I've been practicing drawing like you. Emily carefully opened the book, holding it where Sarah could see if she were able to focus. This is my favorite, she said, turning to a landscape Sarah had painted of Boston Harbor at sunset. Dad says this is where you used to walk together. As they continued talking, taking turns sharing stories and memories, the signs of Sarah's awareness became increasingly apparent. Tears, slight movements, changes in breathing patterns. When a nurse came to check on them, Maxwell described what they'd observed. That's more response than we've documented before, she said, clearly excited. I'll note it in her chart and let Dr. Winters know right away. Over the next several hours, they established a pattern. Emily would read from her mother's sketchbook or share stories. Maxwell would talk about their past together and plans for the future, and Sarah would respond in her limited way, each reaction seeming slightly stronger than the last. By late afternoon, Emily had curled up on the bed beside her mother, carefully, avoiding the monitoring equipment, and fallen asleep. Maxwell sat watching them both, his daughter and the woman he had never stopped loving, feeling a sense of completeness he'd thought forever lost. Dr. Winters returned, reviewing Sarah's charts with evident interest. This is remarkable, she said quietly, mindful of Emily's sleep. We've seen more documented responses today than in the past 3 months combined. What does it mean? Maxwell asked, hope and fear battling within him. It's too soon to make definitive predictions, Dr. Winters cautioned, but this level of response suggests there may be more potential for recovery than previously assessed. The human brain is remarkably resilient, capable of forging new neural pathways even after significant trauma. Sometimes all it needs is the right stimulus. Like hearing her daughter's voice, Maxwell suggested. Dr. Winters nodded. Exactly. Emotional connections can sometimes reach patients when other methods fail. She hesitated, then added, I understand you're planning to relocate Sarah to Boston. Yes. I've already arranged for a medical transport team and home setup. I'd like to propose an alternative, Dr. Winters said. Our facility here is specifically designed for cases like Sarah's, with specialized equipment and therapeutic approaches not easily replicated in a home environment. What if, instead of moving her, you and Emily relocated here temporarily? We have guest accommodations for family members, and Emily could continue her treatment at our affiliated pediatric center, just 20 minutes away. Maxwell considered the suggestion. You think being here would benefit Sarah more than moving her? I do. Consistency is important in neurological recovery, and based on today's responses, I believe having you and Emily visit regularly could be the catalyst her brain needs to continue re-establishing connections. The decision was surprisingly easy. We'll do it. I can work remotely, and if Emily's doctors agree her treatment can be continued at your affiliated center, there's nothing keeping us in Boston that's more important than this. When Emily awoke, they discussed the new plan with her. Her enthusiastic response, we get to stay near Mom and help her wake up, settled any lingering doubts. Over the following weeks, they established a new routine. Mornings were devoted to Emily's treatment at the pediatric center, where her progress continued to impress her medical team. Afternoons and evenings were spent with Sarah, whose responses grew gradually more pronounced. Eye movements tracking their presence, fingers curling around theirs when they held her hands, changes in breathing patterns that seemed to correspond to emotional moments in their conversations. 1 month into their stay, during a sunset that painted Sarah's room in hues reminiscent of her favorite paintings, Emily was showing her mother a new drawing she'd created. See, Mom, it's all of us together at the beach. Dad says when you're better, we can go to Cape Cod and build sandcastles and look for shells and everything. Maxwell, who had stepped away to take a business call, returned to find Emily chattering away. He paused in the doorway, content to watch their one-sided interaction, when something made his heart stop. Sarah's lips were moving. Emily, he said quietly, trying to keep his voice steady. Keep talking to your mum, don't stop. Emily, sensing something important was happening, continued her description of beach adventures with renewed enthusiasm. Maxwell moved to Sarah's side, watching intently as her lips formed soundless words, her brow furrowed with concentration. Sarah, he prompted gently, we're here. Emily and I are right here with you. A sound emerged, faint, raspy from years of disuse, but unmistakably her voice. Emily. Emily's eyes widened to perfect circles. She said my name. Dad, she said, my name. Maxwell hit the call button for the nurse, his own eyes filling with tears. Yes, sweetheart, she did. What followed was a flurry of medical activity, doctors examining Sarah, conducting tests, documenting her unexpected vocalization. This is significant progress, Dr. Winters explained later. It suggests higher cortical function than we previously believed possible at this stage. We'll need to adjust her rehabilitation program immediately to build on this breakthrough. That night, after Emily had fallen asleep in their guest quarters, Maxwell returned to Sarah's room. The moonlight streaming through the window cast her in a silvery glow, and for a moment he was transported back to their early days together. Nights spent talking until dawn, planning futures that had seemed limitless then. I never stopped looking for you, he said softly, taking her hand. Never stopped loving you. And now that I've found you, I'm never letting go again. Her fingers twitched against his, and her lips moved again. He leaned closer, straining to hear. Maxwell, she managed, the effort evident in each syllable. I'm here, he assured her, tears flowing freely now. I'm right here. Emily, she said again, her voice slightly stronger. Our daughter. Yes, he confirmed, his heart soaring. Our beautiful, brave, incredible daughter. A ghost of a smile touched Sarah's lips before exhaustion claimed her, and she drifted back to sleep, her hand still clasped in his. 6 months later, on a crisp spring morning, 3 figures made their way slowly along the shore of a small lake on the Lakewood Haven grounds. Sarah, seated in a specialized wheelchair, watched as Emily chased seagulls at the water's edge. Maxwell walked beside her, one hand resting lightly on her shoulder. Sarah's recovery had defied all medical expectations, while she still faced significant challenges: limited mobility on her right side, speech that sometimes faltered when she was tired. Her cognitive functions had returned remarkably intact. Memory gaps remained, particularly around the time of Emily's birth, but each day seemed to bring new connections, new recollections. Emily, now in full remission, bounded back to them, her cheeks flushed with health and excitement. "Mom, Dad, look what I found!" She held out a perfectly formed blue feather, a gift from the morning's expedition. Sarah accepted it with her good hand, smiling at her daughter's enthusiasm. "It's beautiful, sweetheart, just like you." Maxwell watched them together, the 2 people he loved most in the world. Both returned to him against impossible odds. The road ahead remained challenging. Sarah would need ongoing rehabilitation, possibly for years. Emily would require regular monitoring to ensure the cancer didn't return. And he had a company to rebuild following William's departure, with a renewed focus on ethical medical research and transparency. But in this moment, watching Emily teaching Sarah how to make a wish on a dandelion seed head, Maxwell knew with bone-deep certainty that everything would be all right. They had found each other across time and tragedy, forged a family from fragments that should never have been separated. "What are you thinking about?" Sarah asked, noticing his contemplative expression. Maxwell smiled, bending to kiss her gently. "Just that some things, once broken, can be rebuilt even stronger than before." Sarah's eyes, wise with the perspective of someone who had journeyed back from the edge of existence, met his. "Not broken," she corrected softly. "Just separated for a while, like puzzle pieces waiting to be joined." Emily, returning from her dandelion hunt, threw her arms around them both. "Can we have a picnic by the big oak tree, the one where the birds make all that noise?" "Absolutely," Maxwell agreed, helping Sarah navigate her wheelchair along the lakeside path. As they moved forward together, father, mother, daughter, the morning sunlight caught them in its golden embrace, illuminating 3 lives that had found their way home to each other against all odds.